Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that literally forms the foundation of our world, yet, it remains almost entirely invisible to most of us. We're talking about cement. But actually, scratch that. We aren't focusing on those massive skyline-altering skyscrapers today. Instead, we're looking at the massive scale of India's cement industry and zooming way in to the invisible micro-units that are actually building our local communities from the ground up.
Okay, let's dive into this. India produces a staggering 350 million tons of cement every single year. To put that into perspective, that makes the country the world's second largest producer of cement, sitting just behind China. It's this massive, multi-billion-dollar engine driving infrastructure, housing, and frankly, a huge chunk of the GDP.
But I want you to think about this for a second. When you look around a typical neighborhood, who actually makes your local water tanks? Who's casting those ring composts in your garden or the drainage pots right out there on your street? It's definitely not those multi-billion-dollar conglomerates shipping tiny pots across the country. So who exactly is doing the heavy lifting at this hyperlocal level?
Section 1. The Indian cement boom versus the local reality. Let's take a quick look at how the corporate giants stack up against the backyard builders. The contrast here between the macro and the micro is just staggering. On a national scale, the Indian cement market is highly consolidated. The top 5 corporate players hold a massive 62.2% market share. But down on the ground, especially in places like the state of Kerala, where land and mineral resources are incredibly tight, the reality looks completely different. Local needs are actually met by these tiny 2 to 4 person backyard micro-units. They operate entirely informally and they fill these absolutely vital local gaps that the corporate giants simply can't reach.
Section 2. Inside Pakkayil's microeconomy. To really understand this, we're going inside a 2026 academic study of 30 surveyed units in Pakkayil village, Kerala, just to see how this vital sector actually operates on the ground.
Look at what these backyard builders are actually producing. A massive 90% of them are making ring composts and flower pots. 86.7% cast drainage pots, and roughly 67% make water tanks. And here's the real kicker. 40% of these units produce just 10 to 20 of these items per day. You might be wondering why so few. Well, it's because they rely entirely on manual labor. There is zero machinery involved in most of these units. Every single piece you see is mixed, molded, and dried completely by hand.
And who exactly is doing all this heavy manual labor? These are truly micro-enterprises. 30% operate with just 2 workers. Over a quarter rely on just a single worker. And another 23% have maybe 3 to 4 people tops. Often the owner isn't sitting behind some air-conditioned desk. They're right there out in the yard, working as a laborer themselves, mixing and molding alongside their tiny crew.
Now, despite that complete lack of machinery and the incredibly small scale, you might be surprised by their financial resilience. A remarkable 76.7% of these units report earning a profit. And the rest, they're breaking even. Exactly 0% reported operating at a loss. That is an incredible survival rate for informal backyard businesses. But as you'll see, those profit margins don't come easy. They come with a very steep human cost.
Which brings us to Section 3, the hidden cost of labor. Let's peel back the layers here and really look at the human toll required to generate that profit on the ground.
So the crucial point here is how these wages are actually structured. 86.7% of the workers in these units are paid by piece rate, not a fixed daily wage. That means they only get paid for what they physically produce that specific day. This creates this intense, relentless pressure to work as fast as humanly possible. And because it's the informal sector, they have absolutely zero social security. In fact, none of the workers surveyed were even registered on the government's e-Shram portal for unorganized workers.
So, when you're literally racing against the clock, mixing wet cement and heavy sand by hand just to earn your keep for the day, what is the physical cost? I'd love for you to just pause a moment and consider the human toll of this fast-paced, unmechanized system.
The reality is quite stark. 70% of workers get absolutely no safety equipment provided at the workplace. None. Only 16.7% actually have safety gear provided by the owner. For the rest, if they want gloves or boots, they have to buy and bring them on their own dime. And remember, these are workers operating on those razor-thin piece rate wages we just talked about.
And this brilliantly illustrates the direct result of those working conditions. A staggering 60% of laborers suffer from cement-induced hand burns. It's heartbreaking. Nearly 47% report chronic body pain from all the heavy lifting, and others face breathing and eye issues from the continuous dust exposure. It's just a really harsh environment. And honestly, this physical toll is the hidden subsidy that's keeping these micro units profitable.
Section 4. The struggle for survival. Because aside from the severe labor challenges, the owners themselves face their own massive daily operational hurdles.
Because these units operate largely in the unorganized sector, getting the business off the ground is incredibly tough. Nearly 67% of the owners had to rely entirely on their personal savings to start their units. Only 30% were actually able to access formal bank loans. They face extreme difficulties accessing formal finance, whether that's due to a lack of documentation or simply a deep-seated fear of taking on formal debt. And once they are operating, the financial pressure doesn't let up for a second. Look at this number. 100%. Absolutely every single surveyed unit cited rising sand and raw material costs as a major daily operational challenge. No exceptions.
To make matters worse, the post-COVID economy squeezed these micro units even further. A massive 90% of units faced increased production costs following the pandemic. And how do they cope? Well, about 63% are forced to rely purely on competitor-based pricing. They can't even price based on their own costs. They just have to match the guy down the street to survive the fierce local market, which further eats into whatever tiny margins they have left.
Unfortunately, survival often comes at the expense of the environment. Due to severe financial and technical limitations, exactly half of these units have absolutely no dust or pollution control measures in place. Another 43.3% try their best, managed by simply throwing a cover over their materials. Many owners are actually totally aware of pollution control norms, but they simply don't have the capital to implement proper environmental safeguards.
So, where do we go from here? Section 5. Building a better future. Let's look at some of the actionable recommendations from the academic study on how to formalize and save this really vital sector.
Let's move to these recommendations and see how this builds a clear roadmap for survival. First, the study recommends forming labor unions, which would give workers the power to negotiate for mandatory safety gear and fair conditions. Second, the government could subsidize raw materials, taking the pressure off owners struggling with skyrocketing sand and cement costs. Third, creating producers' associations would allow these units to collaborate and stabilize their local pricing. And finally, implementing interest subventions, which are basically just cheaper loans, would allow these entrepreneurs to buy basic machinery and finally move away from that backbreaking manual labor.
It leaves us with a really profound thought. These micro units, these invisible men and women working in their backyards, are quite literally building the foundations of our local communities. They cast the tanks that hold our water and the rings that manage our waste. But if the microeconomy builds our foundations, who is building a foundation for them? It's a huge question of resilience and the true cost of the informal economy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep learning and keep asking questions about the world around you.